He won't power down. He's like Ultron. He just keeps going. Every day, it's something crazier than the next. I made a list. This is all in the last 2 months. I made a quick list. I will run through it. He paved over the Rose Garden. He's building a golden ballroom at the White House. He's planning a UFC fight at the White House. He cut off Kamala Harris's Secret Service protection. He named himself host of the Kennedy Center.
You know, the authoritarian, the demagogue, it goes away when they go away, and he will go away. And we will, and they don't have anybody that's as charismatic as him. He's charismatic. There's no taking that away from him. He's a television star. He is. He's charismatic. I mean, I don't agree with him at all on anything, but, you know, he was famous from a television show.
Trump's presidency has spiraled into such a circus that even veteran entertainers like Jimmy Kimmel and George Clooney can't resist turning it into comedy gold. And why should they? Each day plays out like a parody sketched by interns who quit halfway through. Kimmel has built a career on lampooning the ridiculous, while Clooney stands as Hollywood's smooth-talking symbol of sharp critique. Together, they treat Trump's presidency as if it were an endless blooper reel, far too long to ever fit on television.
And I think unjustly, this puts them at risk. The President of the United States made it very clear he wants to see me and the hundreds of people who work here fired from our jobs. Our leader celebrates Americans losing their livelihoods because he can't take a joke. He was...
I mean, personally, being targeted by the administration?
Sure, everybody worries about it, but, you know, if you spend your life worrying about things, then you won't do things. You know, we like everybody have a family, we have a life, and we have, and we try to, you know, live and do the things as the best example for our kids.
If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. The roast kicks off with the sheer spectacle of Trump's public appearances. Kimmel doesn't need to craft punchlines when the president provides his own slapstick shuffling across stages, flailing his arms like a broken marionette and freezing dramatically as if waiting for applause that almost never comes on cue. Clooney joins in, noting that no performer in history has worked harder to miss their mark. He describes Trump's stage presence as less presidential and more like an amateur audition that somehow slipped past the first round because the judges were too polite to laugh out loud.
He's going to be a factor for a while. It's so funny because, you know, he was just this knucklehead. I knew him before he was, you know, a president. He was just a guy who was chasing girls. You know, every time he went out, he'd come over and be like, "What's the name of that girl?" You know, that's all he was. And the idea that there's this whole group of people that, you know, that they think he's the champion of, which he certainly can't stand in real life. But, you know, he's gonna play this out for a while, and we'll see where we go with it.
And then there's the hair. Always the hair. Kimmel treats it like a separate character in this political saga, a golden tumbleweed that looks ready to blow away with the slightest gust. Clooney, with his salt and pepper dignity, contrasted against Trump's desperate spray and comb routine, a ritual that screams insecurity louder than any policy speech ever could. The punchline isn't just that the hair looks ridiculous, it's that the President of the United States spends more time perfecting a gravity-defying swirl than preparing for global summits.
You know, there's a rumor making the rounds this weekend that Trump was dead because he hadn't been in front of a camera for a few days. That's how much he's in front of a camera. When we don't see him there, we assume he must be dead. And also he has mysterious bruising on his hand, which they tried to cover up with makeup. And this cover-up's even sloppier than the Epstein one. How could anyone let him go out like this? I mean, like he was spackled. He had to have done that himself, right? Looks great, sir. No one will notice a thing. The White House claims the reason for these bruises and his big fat elephant ankles is he suffers from a condition known as chronic venous insufficiency, which in layman's terms means he's got a very small venus. He's got an insufficient...
Kimmel has a field day with Trump's obsession with rallies. No matter what crisis unfolds, Trump clings to his crowds like a struggling comedian refusing to leave the stage after bombing a set. Clooney adds that it's like watching a washed-up lounge act still demanding standing ovations for the same worn-out routine. The jokes don't come off as cruel, they come off as accurate. For Trump, the rallies serve as emotional life support, a place where applause patches the holes left by collapsing credibility.
Able to squeeze Colbert out of CBS, then he turned his sights on me, and now he's openly rooting for NBC to fire Jimmy Fallon and Seth Meyers and the hundreds of Americans who work for their shows who don't make millions of dollars. And I hope that if that happens, or if there's even any hint of that happening, you will be 10 times as loud as you were this week. We have to speak out against it.
The policies become easy fodder, too. Kimmel mocks Trump's endless fixation on walls, bans, and tariffs by painting him as a home improvement host gone rogue. It's like watching a reality show contestant try to fence in the entire world using nothing but duct tape and ego. Clooney follows up by pointing out how these grand ideas usually collapse under the weight of their own contradictions. Yet Trump insists on packaging them as if they're revolutionary breakthroughs.
Center honors. He went to Alaska to bend over for Putin. He sent military tanks into Washington, D.C. He said the Smithsonian focuses too much on how bad slavery was. He called India and Norway to tell them to nominate him for a Nobel Prize. And he cut off funding for pediatric brain cancer research for children. You would think a person who himself has the brain of a child would be in favor of funding pediatric brain care research.
On the world stage, Trump's meetings with global leaders looked less like diplomacy and more like a family reunion he wasn't invited to. Kimmel joked the photo ops felt like hostage situations, with leaders desperate to escape. Clooney added that presidents should project stability, not drag other nations into slapstick sketches. Even the economy, once Trump's bragging point, became a gag. Kimmel noted how he strutted as if he invented prosperity, convinced confidence could bend reality. And of course, no roast skips his late-night tweets. Kimmel calls them drunk texts from the world's most powerful man, except instead of deleting them, Trump doubles down.
And it's not just comedy. He's gunning for our journalists too. He's suing them, he's bullying them. Over the weekend, his foxy friend Pete Hegseth announced a new policy that requires journalists with Pentagon press credentials to sign a pledge promising not to report information that hasn't been explicitly authorized for release. That includes unclassified information. They want to pick and choose what the news is. I know that's not as interesting as muzzling a comedian, but it's so important to have a free press, and it is nuts that we aren't paying more attention to it.
Clooney likens it to a soap opera, where the star writes his own terrible lines. The tweets, full of misspellings and rambling, can shake global markets, yet read like they were typed with oven mitts. Then there's Trump's endless craving for flattery, more pageant contestant than president, fishing for applause. Kimmel mocks the loyalists who clap on cue, while Clooney notes no real leader should need daily affirmations just to function. Together, they paint his presidency as a failed therapy session, with a patient demanding constant reassurance. Kimmel also cracks at the mountain of legal troubles, calling it the busiest courtroom in America without a laugh track. Clooney adds the irony. A man who claimed to master business now spends more time defending his empire than building it.
I didn't think people would vote for someone who was so deeply flawed. I mean, I know Donald Trump. I mean, that's the thing is people, I have his phone number in my phone book. He was the guy that came to the bars and asked me about which cocktail waitress was single. That's who he was.
This is back in the 90s.
Well, not that long, no, back in the 2000s, quite honestly. And so there's this part of you that just goes, well, that guy shouldn't. But I was wrong, and he was, and our democracy, I believe, paid a price certainly around the world.
Even Trump's bond with his own party becomes a punchline. Kimmel compares it to a bad marriage where everyone smiles for the cameras but secretly wants a divorce. Clooney adds that many politicians look like hostages, trapped by a president who demands loyalty but never gives it back. The picture is both funny and sad. Grown adults too scared to oppose a man whose main weapon is public shaming. Kimmel also skewers Trump's obsession with superlatives, everything, the biggest, the greatest. His cozy ties with authoritarian leaders make him seem less like a defender of democracy and more like a starstruck fanboy. Kimmel mocks the awkward handshakes, while Clooney warns these alliances damage America's image abroad. It's comedy that bites, funny, but rooted in real risks.
I was in Wyoming, I was in Palm Springs. I even got to be part of a big meeting in Washington, D.C.
Christy?
Well, Mr. President, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to work for you. Mr. President, I invite you to see your big, beautiful face on a banner in front of the Department of Labor.
Thank you for saving college football, by the way. We're all very grateful.
You are the single finest candidate since this Nobel Award was ever talked about. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, I want you to know sometimes when I watch you striding across the White House lawn so confidently, with so much masculinity, I'll admit it, I get sexually aroused. Thank you for breathing life back into my once slumbering penis.
Environmental policy gives comedians more ammo. Trump shrugs off climate science, leading Kimmel to joke about a president who treats consensus like a negotiable suggestion. Clooney says it's like watching someone bail water from a sinking boat while insisting it can't sink. The humor lies in that gulf between reality and his forced confidence. Healthcare gets roasted too. Kimmel recalls endless promises of replacement plans that never appeared, treating them like mythical creatures. And despite his power, Trump plays the underdog, which Clooney mocks as Superman whining about how hard it is to be Superman. The joke stings because it shows just how fragile the persona really is.
Look, I never imagined I would be in a situation like this. I barely paid attention in school. But one thing I did learn from Lenny Bruce and George Carlin and Howard Stern is that a government threat to silence a comedian the president doesn't like is anti-American. That's anti-American. And I am so glad we have some solidarity on that from the right and the left and from those in the middle like Joe Rogan.
The pandemic becomes the roast's darkest chapter. Kimmel mocks press conferences that felt more like game shows, with Trump fumbling half-baked ideas while trying to look calm. Clooney frames it as denial mixed with spectacle, turning catastrophe into political farce. Even Trump's family isn't spared. Kimmel jokes about the parade of relatives in government as if nepotism were constitutional law. Then come the ratings and crowd obsessions. Kimmel ridicules the notion that TV numbers or rally sizes equal governance, while Clooney compares it to an actor judging success by how many people wandered into the wrong theater. Together, the jokes expose a president hooked on validation, unable to tell popularity from progress.
President, why would they want someone back who does so poorly, who's not funny, and who puts the network in jeopardy by playing 99% positive Democrat garbage? Who puts the network in jeopardy? You hear that? There's the threat again. This time straight from FCC Biscuit's mouth. He goes, he says, I think we're going to test ABC out on this. Let's see how we do. Last time I went after them, they gave me $16 million. This one sounds even more lucrative. A true bunch of losers. Only Donald Trump would try to prove he wasn't threatening ABC by threatening ABC. And you almost have to feel sorry for the people who work for him, who try to clean up the messes. They've been bending over backwards to say, oh, he never.
Clooney turns Trump's legacy into a mockumentary in the making. He jokes that future historians won't need archives, just a highlight reel of blunders looping in classrooms as a cautionary tale. Picture students studying presidents with solemn respect, then watching Trump ramble, flail, and claim imaginary wins. Clooney adds that his presidential library won't hold books, but TVs replaying embarrassments, with gift shops selling red caps and gold pens that die halfway through, like his policy promises. Kimmel piles on, imagining an exhibit where visitors tweet blindfolded, producing results indistinguishable from Trump's midnight rants. The irony cuts deep. Trump wanted monuments of power, but his legacy may be carnival gimmicks preserved for mockery.
Trump is a big fan of yours, but he posted in July, now fake movie actor George Clooney is getting into the act. He's turned on Crooked Joe. What does Clooney know about anything? Should get out of politics and go back to television. Movies never really worked for him.
I will if he does.
He doesn't know that movies are fake, does he?
I don't think so.
Even Trump's name becomes a punchline. Kimmel imagines it living on not as a family crest, but as a warning label slapped on reckless decisions. Clooney sees it used in classrooms as shorthand for self-inflicted chaos, much like Waterloo stands for defeat. The name itself becomes comedy currency, shorthand for the quickest path from confidence to collapse. Kimmel ties it back to television, joking that Trump's obsession with ratings means his presidency may be remembered less as governance and more as a botched series finale. Clooney twists the knife, noting even the worst soap operas try to wrap up their plots, while Trump left cliffhangers no one cared to resolve. Together, they argue his legacy won't be measured by leadership, but by the avalanche of jokes it inspired. A presidency that should have been solemn history, but instead morphed into parody.